Patchwork Heart Ministry and Fiat Ministry Network present the Discover Your Mission series.
Now, I had been brought up without any prayer, without Bible, without church, nothing of that kind. And so when my father died, I became suicidally depressed. I had no desire to live. And yet, by the grace of God, whenever I got to the point of actually taking my life, I always had this interior conviction that if I took my life, I would simply find it again on the other side, and it would be permanent misery.
But it wasn't until I became a wife and a mother, and I began to try and pass my faith on to my children, that I realized that everything I knew about Jesus was memorized doctrine.
I was a good man, I was a good father, I was instilling the sacraments into my family. I was definitely not intentional. I was stuck rope in my faith.
But what kind of strength did he have? Jackie did not just have a strength of body or baseball skill. He had a strength inside of his spirit, a courageous meekness that empowered him to play the game.
And I tell him what is going on with me, and he's like, oh, okay. And I'm like, no, I think this is like some sort of miracle, dude. And he's like, okay, of course, but I'll believe it when I see it. Honey, you've been trying to quit, and you've been saying this and saying that, and his big line to me is, you shouldn't say things, because I never follow through on them. And so this was week after week, month after month. He is looking at me like, this is a miracle. There is no way that you, on your own, could have done this.
So we are called to sing. All of us are called to sing. All of us are called to express ourselves and join our voice into the unity of the church. Often with my choirs, I ask them to listen to each other, to listen to the sound that they make together as one. That's what we're aiming for. Through the harmony or unison, we're aiming for a one sound.
You need to decide, what are you going to participate in? Are you going to participate in the historic Christian idea of the altar of sacrifice, which is in the Eucharist, or not?
Welcome to the Sowing Hope podcast. This is a show all about implanting hope in our hearts. I'm Bill Snyder, joined by my friend Ann DeSantis. We're glad you're here for our uplifting conversation about faith and how it sustains our hearts through all the seasons of life. Thanks for walking with us. And good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Sowing Hope podcast. I am Bill Snyder. It's great to be with you. It's another one of those evenings in Wisconsin, anyway, when it begins to get colder out, snow, rain, all that yucky stuff. But I'm glad I'm inside and being able to talk with you this evening and be here on another episode of Sowing Hope. As always, I'm joined by my friend Ann DeSantis. And how are you, Ann? Is it always dark in Philadelphia tonight?
Well, tonight it is. I'm right next to the window, and it's pretty much pitch black outside. So,
very good. Well, we have another great show for everybody. It's incredible. We've started off the new year so strong, and we have a great guest with us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about her?
Yes, I am so excited. We have an amazing guest, Kimberly Cook, coming to us from Virginia. She's married to her husband, Corey, 4 children, the author of the book Motherhood Redeemed by Tan Books and the Dignity of Women podcast. She has an amazing story where she really came into her Catholic faith and decided to let go of all of the societal norms and put aside what society presents to us as to what motherhood really means. And it means so much more than that. So, Kimberly, thank you so much for joining us on Sowing Hope.
Thank you both for having me. It's very exciting to be here. And I am looking forward to the conversation ahead.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh. You have like an incredible story that just had me so intrigued because, sometimes when you talk to people of faith, and Bill and I talk to so many people of deep faith in our Catholic faith, and a lot of them, quite frankly, a lot of them were raised in very devout homes and never really had that sort of major conversion experience because they came from, large Catholic families where maybe they were homeschooled or very much catechized at a young age. But I know for you, it was a little different than that.
That's right. It was definitely, of course, we're trying to make our kids to be those people that you're talking about. And hopefully they hold on to the faith just like, the people that you talk to now that have that deep faith. And, we're homeschooling and we're trying to instill that catechism early and that love of the faith. So hopefully our kids will be those people, because neither my husband or I were those kids or those young adults, and we both had to kind of fight our way into the church. But yes, that's not at all the way that it was for me.
Awesome.
Yeah, love your story.
Yeah.
I just love it.
Share it with a little bit of our listeners. Just because, there's probably some people out there listening tonight that don't know that story. So if you can highlight some of it for us, I always say, or many people say, that the only thing you cannot argue with, we can argue over doctrine and dogma, but the one thing you can't argue with is personal testimony when it comes to Jesus. And so tell us a little bit about your journey, Kimberly, for those who are listening who don't know it.
Exactly. Yeah, that is so true about testimony. And that's really why I thought it was so important when I wrote this book to entwine my personal story with the work of feminism through the ages in this country. So with my story, I was raised Catholic, but it was not a deep or devoted Catholicism. It was basically just a ritualistic, like we go to Mass on Sundays, and then the rest of the day we can do whatever we want, football or whatever. And the rest of the week is just nothing to do with God. There's really no inclusion of the faith in the rest of the week other than just going to church on Sundays. And we didn't have much catechesis on top of that. So it was very shallow. And then when we got old enough to about, my brother and I, when we got to the age of about middle school, we started to question why do we have to wake up early on Sundays? Why do we have to do this sit, stand? What's the point of all this? What is up with the Eucharist? What does that even mean? Just all the questions, why do you have to go to confession for, to a priest? And just what's up with Mary? Just all these kind of surface level questions that every outsider of the faith or kid that is looking at the faith without answers is asking. And my parents, who had been raised in the church, but the 60s and 70s and all that kind of stuff, and just had a poor catechesis themselves and just kind of went along with the whole, we do this because we do this. And they never really questioned it. They just went to church on Sundays. So when they started getting pummeled by my brother and I with questions, they were like, honestly, we don't know. Question, why are we doing this? It wasn't like, let's go find answers. It was almost just kind of like, man, maybe we're in the wrong too. Maybe we've just been blindly following this our whole lives, and maybe it doesn't really mean anything. Or, maybe you can just have a faith life and believe in God and pray in your own room. Maybe you don't really need to go to church, or maybe these sacraments don't really mean much more than just kind of symbols or whatever. So unfortunately, our whole family fell away from the church by the time I went to high school, and I went to a public high school. And a lot of my friends were very secular, not at all grounded in any kind of faith. And, so I started to really get drawn into their understanding of life and philosophy. And that was very much rooted in relativism. And it started to make perfect sense to me because I didn't have any other side to counter it. I knew nobody who was truly Catholic at all during those 4 years of high school. So all the other voices, media, friends, teachers at my public school, all of them kind of had this wash up of the sexual revolution going on. And so, yeah, to me, what became really appealing was feminism. And I started to get in with some other girls who considered themselves feminists and started to learn more about that movement. I joined a punk rock band, an all-girl band, and we really started kind of spreading that feminist rhetoric in our music. And, as I got deeper and deeper, though, the same kind of thing that you hear from a lot of people is there was nothing uplifting. It was all darkness and despair and dead ends and empty doors and empty promises and, the whole sex, drugs, rock and roll kind of thing. Like there's really nothing good and redeeming and valuable in any of that. So eventually you're going to crash and burn, or you're just going to go along with that for the rest of your life. And kind of, you see some of these rock stars now that are in their 60s or 70s and they're still trying to tour and do stuff like that, and they're still trying to make this cool and make this happen, and you're thinking, wow, they just lived this lie their whole life, like for 40 or more years they've just been going with this, and I think that either you have an awakening and you kind of realize, like, what is this, I'm not doing this for the rest of my life, or you just kind of like turn that part of your brain and your heart off and you just kind of roll with it for the rest of your life.
Yeah, you bring up some really awesome points, and your story is so great that you highlight how you kind of navigated through a lot of the lies. Share with us coming out of that. Share with us, getting out of that mentality. Where was the Jesus moment? We use that term a lot, but where was that Jesus moment or that God moment that kind of awoke in you to say, all right, now I'm going to step out and begin looking at really where, what God is calling me to do?
Right. Yeah. So, like I was saying, I started to really struggle with that idea that there's got to be something more to life. Like there has to be something more, or else what are we all just doing here? This is just some cruel trick of, either just, if there is a God, then he's just, really kind of evil and just watching all of us suffer, and we're all just, kind of going in circles. Or I didn't see that love anywhere, or else there is no God and we have no purpose to our existence. We live so many odd years. There's suffering, there's pain, there's good moments too, but then it's just darkness forever, and none of those seemed like they made sense to me. So I started, as a lot of people do, just looking for the truth, looking for the something more that had to be out there. Something inside of me told me there's got to be something more than this. There's got to be more than after this life and everything like that. So I knew that it wasn't in the Catholic Church because I had already been there. I'd already checked that off the list. And I already knew that the truth was definitely not existent in the Catholic Church. So I kind of just started looking to every religion. I started kind of studying every religion, Eastern religion, Western religion. And I realized that one thing that my Catholicism did plant in my heart, and having those sacraments, those early sacraments of baptism and communion and confession from when I was younger, those definitely planted in me a understanding that it had to be Jesus. If I was going to embrace faith, it couldn't be something without Jesus. So I started going to some different Protestant churches because I was like, okay, I'm not going to be Catholic, but I am going to be Christian. So that means I guess I'm Protestant, and I started going, and everything was great for a while. But there was still something missing. And I didn't know, again, I don't know if that came from my childhood in the church, something about the Eucharist, something about Mary, I'm not sure what exactly it was, but it wasn't enough, it wasn't all there. And so I was still like in a very rebellious state, but yet, you know, kind of two sides of me fighting with each other. This like want to prove that it's all wrong and remain in this rebellious state, or to embrace some kind of a truth and just go with that. And so it's kind of like fighting back and forth. And I started dating this guy who was an atheist, but he got a job, as Providence would have it, at a firm run by an Italian Catholic family that was very devout in their faith. And he knew that I was on this quest, you know, for religion or whatever. And so he said, you got to meet my boss. You know, he's this Italian Catholic and he knows his faith really well. And I was like, oh, come on, I already checked off Catholic from the list. Like, nobody can tell me anything that I don't know about the church, because I thought I knew it all at that time. I was like a little punk, you know? And so I go to finally talk to him, and he honestly was one of those first people. You know, there was a few people along the way, probably like 3 people that I can put my finger on, who I encountered during that time, who really said things differently than I had ever heard them, who really had a love that was deeper than anyone I had known, and really had answers that made more sense than, well, we just do it because we do it, because you're just supposed to go on Sundays. That's just why. I don't know why. So, you know, he was one of those kind of 3 pillars of people that I crossed paths with, that God, you know, put in my path. And then, you know, that really started me thinking and really challenged me. And from there, you know, I decided to join RCIA just to find out what I didn't know about Catholicism. Not that I was going to become Catholic or anything, but just to find out what I didn't know, because I realized maybe there was more that I didn't know than I thought. And then I just had this beautiful moment happen with Our Lady, and ultimately wound up at like the odd man out there who wasn't homeschooled, who hadn't been practicing my faith, who didn't even know how to pray the rosary. And I always tell how funny it was, because I was on one of the intramural sports teams, and I was like heading up the team. And I knew that like whenever you said, you know, St. Joseph, everyone would say, pray for me. So I said, we all put our hands in, and I'm like, St. Michael the Archangel. And I'm expecting everyone to be like, pray for me. And then we run out on the field and they're like, defend us in battle, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what? Like, why do they always do that every time I say St. Michael the Archangel? Like, what is the deal? Like, you know, I was so confused. I was like, all right, don't say St. Michael, pick St. Joseph or something else. Because every time I say St. Michael, they all start going into this like whole prayer or something. So yeah, there was definitely like odd moments like that. But yeah, so that was kind of the turnaround point for me. Obviously, when I went to Steubenville, everything kind of changed. All those walls came crashing down. The truth came, you know, blasting through full force, and, you know, everything started to turn around and make sense and fit together for me.
Awesome.
Yeah, awesome. I love your story. And myself being a mother too, I mean, I love to hear stories like yours where you're really taking motherhood seriously for what it is, for the gift that it is to all of us as Catholic moms, but, you know, not just as Catholic moms, as moms, really. I mean, for all humans. And I think that's just amazing. And your story, I love it so much. I want to ask people to go to kimberlycook.me and learn about the great work that you're doing. So now I'd love to hear about your life now with your husband and your kids, and you know what you're doing and what it's like to be a now I don't know if you're a stay-at-home mom. I'm kind of guessing that maybe you are. Mm-hmm. What's that like for you?
Well, it's definitely different than what I would have ever thought, because obviously, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. We can
hear you. Okay, I lost sound for a second there.
No worries.
But no, it is beautiful. It's absolutely wonderful, but it's also, like I say in the book too, it's the hardest thing I've ever had to do. You know, I was so convinced when I was kind of entrenched in that feminist mentality that being a mother was the worst thing on earth. It was for the loser who had no brains, no ambition, who wasted their degrees, and I had all the worst thoughts of motherhood. And I knew that I would never be a mother. That was something that I could have vowed to myself. And so I guess in life, it was one of the greatest surprises that God did call me to be a wife and mother of 4 and to stay home with them, to homeschool them. I mean, all of these things, you could not have convinced me, a younger version of myself, in high school or early 20s, you could have never convinced me that I would be here. I would just laugh in your face, And so it's just funny to think of that. But also, it's definitely not easy. When you look, I look at all of these feminists throughout United States history in my book. And one thing that they all kind of have in common, no matter what side of the coin they fit on with their beliefs in women staying home or not staying home or doing this or doing that, one thing that they kind of all have in common is to admit how hard motherhood is and what a challenging vocation it is. What a challenging job. Even Margaret Sanger said about her own mother, what a beautiful, position it was, and how well she did it. Article, they still had this kind of sacred respect for motherhood that more modern feminism has kind of lost. But for me, I see it as something where, your vices come to the surface every day, all the time. You think that you're a patient person for the most part until you get married, and then until you have kids, and then until you're deprived. You hear mommy, mommy, mommy like 5 million times a day. And I'm pretty virtuous of a person. I'm fairly patient. I'm this and that. Like, you're good. And then you get married and you're like, wow, I'm not so great at this. And then you have kids and you're like, I am terrible at this. Like, I need to, what happened to that virtuous single woman who was in confession so many years ago? Either she was delusional or had nothing else to challenge her. And I think that was what it was. Like, I didn't have anything to challenge me like I do now. My time was my own time. So I think it is a gift, and it's also the hardest job I've ever had in my life. And you also can't resign. You can't be like, what, this is not for me. There's too many. This just isn't working.
Yeah, I love it. I love to hear it. And we've never had a podcast on this particular topic, but let's just say you and I have a little more in common than maybe some people know with our early lives. I didn't have a conversion really deeply into my faith until like early 30s. So, and wound up being the stay-at-home mom and homeschooled my kids from preschool all the way to grade 12. And, got involved in a career, after they graduated from high school and things like that. So, but yeah, I was a child of the early 80s and thought the same way that you did about motherhood and about career. And why would I want to be a stay-at-home mom? Why would I even want to maybe not even have kids? Because, my life is more about me, and so it takes a pretty big conversion to come to that conclusion that, what, life isn't about me. It's about God, and it's about what God's will is for me. So that's one reason why I love your story, because honestly, I can really relate. So thank you so much.
I think you're welcome. I think a lot of women can relate to this. It's so funny how many people read the book and they're like, I can absolutely relate. I was so sucked into feminism. Or people that say, I don't think I in any way a feminist or have any, and then they read the book and they're like, wow, I didn't realize how influenced I was or have been throughout my life by the feminist movement until you kind of lay it all out there. And I realize I've been more influenced by a lot of this than I either knew or maybe was willing to admit to myself or things like that. And I like what you said about having to realize that life is not about us, because yeah, same thing. My life was about me. What do I want? What career do I want? What do I want to do with my life? And I can't be dragged down by other people, even if they're my own children. You know, I can't have other impediments in my way. And to think that you, first of all, we're so selfish to look at your children and to ever think that they could be like impediments to what's important in life. It's like, okay, that was completely backwards. But also, I think that that's something still that I have to choose every day, is that it's not about me. You know, like I think we never stop having to choose that no matter what. Every single day, it's like, okay, this isn't about me. It's about God. It's not about me, it's about God. And
No, absolutely. And think about all of the young people, especially I think in our current culture, young women especially, who are being, quote, sucked into this mentality of, you know, and I don't know what both of your opinion is on this, and maybe we can talk about it, but I think that's something I see in our culture, especially when it comes to little kids, is we instill this whole idea that, hey, you can do whatever you want, be whoever you want to be. And, you know, spending a lot of money that we spend on different activities for our kids, which is all beautiful and wonderful. But I think sometimes we spend all this time on them when they're younger, and then we get to a certain age in our culture where all of that kind of drops off. As you notice, the older we get, the less important people become, right? So we teach the kids at a young age that it's so important to find out who you are and have all these different hobbies and sports and everything. But then as they mature and get older, notice how, you know, once you hit into your 40s, 50s, and I mean, I'm in my 50s now, but I mean, 60s, 70s, the older we get, it's almost like people become invisible. So what are we really teaching them, you know, I mean, about life? What are we teaching them about the value of every human life from conception to natural death? We're teaching them, I think, that they're real important when they're younger, and the younger you are, the more important you are, but the older you get, the less important. Does that make any sense? I don't know if anybody's ever thought
that's
that.
a really good point.
Yeah, I mean,
I definitely think that you make a good point with spending so much on our children, you know, sometimes just too much exorbitant, like putting them in a million sports and activities, and, you know, the family is doing something every single night of the week, running this person here and that person there. And it's like the family actually is no longer central or important. It's all the activities that kind of run the family's life. And I think that is one of the beautiful things that you see in large families. First of all, they just can't do that as much. And it's just not financially possible. It's not physically possible to be in a million places at once. So even if they wanted to, they couldn't. But also, you kind of learn early on about sacrifice, you know, that not everyone can play a sport this year, or not everybody can do everything they want to do. And I think that is essential, to learn that it's about the other, you know, it's not just about you. So it's just from the earliest moments of life, in the earliest years, you have to learn that it's not all about you. You're not number one. And, you know, if you don't play soccer this year, I'm sure you'll be fine. You know what I mean? Like, it's certainly not going to affect your entrance into heaven. And the chances of you becoming a professional soccer player are not that great. You know, so I think sometimes we really put the wrong things at the forefront, and we do lose sight of the family, or how important it is to teach our kids to sacrifice for each other and for the family unit and for other people, and that it is important to put others first, and it's not all about you. And some people you see who are, like you said, in their 30s, 40s, or beyond, still haven't learned that. Those are the worst.
Oh, absolutely. People can become, and I say people because I'm not just talking about other people. I mean, we all can become selfish in our thoughts and ways, right? I mean, we're all guilty of it, I think. But I think we need to teach kids more about being servants to others. And I don't mean servants to us. I mean just how to be serving your communities and God and others, and not all this big focus on all of these activities that parents pay an arm and a leg for. You take lessons for a certain age where the parents pay thousands of dollars, but then once high school's done, they stop paying, and then does the kid continue with it? So I guess that's my point. I think that we're putting our money in the wrong place. And like you said, when you have bigger families, not everybody can afford all that stuff. And these are all really important things to think about, and prayer, I think, as a family is very important. I know that you probably do too. I think we're frozen.
Absolutely.
Here for a
Yeah. I mean,
okay.
Okay. Yeah, we've definitely embraced the family rosary every day. I think that has been something for me that's been so unifying, because no matter how much you feel like you failed through the day, there's certainly days where I'm like, oh my gosh, I just failed so much as a mother today. Like I just lost patience. I just, had a bad day with the kids. And it's like coming together at the end of the night with the rosary all together. You realize that once again, it's not about you, and you're not getting graded on this day, and this doesn't determine whether you're going to keep your job or not, but you realize that it's about God, and ultimately tomorrow's a new day, and he's the one who is binding you. He's the one who's uniting you in prayer. He's brought you to this point, first of all, with your spouse, with your children, with whatever blessings that you have. He's gotten you there, and he will get you beyond there. And so I think that for me, the rosary is so powerful and also so humbling at the end of every day. And you really notice it if you like, if you're traveling or something and you kind of miss that family being together and praying, that it affects your night and your next day. You realize that something's missing.
No, absolutely. I agree with you. I'm sure Bill's nodding. I know he does too.
No, I think it's so. I think you're so spot on with so many of your comments and analysis of things, Kimberly. That praying together, really does keep the family together. It solves a lot of the, the failures of the day, right? I mean, love covers a multitude of sins, and I think if we can, pray together and love one another in the rosary, I think it just is one of those great family things. So kudos to you, and a lot of young people out there listening, or if you're listening to this, maybe consider doing it with your, kids before bedtime, or praying a family rosary, so that you can grow closer, to your relationship with God and your children at the same time. You can grow closer to your relationship with your husband and with God at the same time. God is ever present, and he inserts ourselves into those moments. I look forward a little bit to my future fatherhood, and it's really not even future; it's here now because my wife is pregnant. But you look forward to those little moments, right? Like, okay, what can we do to insert God into the moments of the day? What can we do to make this a wholesome day to day, and even amidst our failings and our faults, that we're going to find ourselves in. God is ever present. He sees it all. He knows it all. And by offering that back to him in a gift of prayer with your children and your family, man, it really does uplift and help them, grow in their faith, and helps you grow in your own faith too, right? Like, it helps you grow in your own faith. And so that's awesome. But I certainly don't want to, change gears too abruptly here, Kimberly. But I do want to make sure we talk a little bit about, certainly the podcast, the dignity of women, and then also, of course, promote the book because I know we're weaving it through the discussion here too. But certainly, tell us a little bit about the podcast, the ministry, and again, Kimberly's website is very simple. It's kimberlycook.me. But tell us a little bit about, because I know you've had some amazing guests on the Dignity of Women podcast, and big shout out to Pete Sachs at Breadbox Media.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, once I came to that place of conversion, I still felt this strong calling to evangelize, to minister, and to reach out to other women. And I wasn't sure how God was going to kind of turn a 180 for that with me, because it had been really negative before that point in time with, this, like I said, feminist rhetoric. So how is God going to still use me? He obviously put some kind of desire to serve women in my heart, but how is he going to transform that now at this point in time? And so that was kind of the question, and it took years to unravel and still slowly unraveling. But one thing was I just started writing. I kind of started blogging early on and then started writing articles. And I was constantly, first of all, I have my master's in theology and systematic theology. So that is definitely a passion of mine. So I wrote a lot of articles in that area. And then I found myself constantly drawn towards the idea of ministering to women and women in scripture and women's role in society, and that the unison of our faith, our Catholic faith, and what Christ calls us to be in the family and in the world. And of course, John Paul II has talked about that like no one else's business. And so one of my favorite encyclicals is Mulieris Dignitatem, which is the dignity of women, written by John Paul II. I've read it a million times. And so when I was asked by, like you said, Pete Sachs to start podcasting, the first thing that really came to my mind was the dignity of women. That, that's got to be what the framework for this is about, and the inspiration coming from John Paul II and from what he spelled out as the dignity of women in the church and in the world. So that's kind of how it started, and it has been great. There's been some amazing guests, and we've been able to talk about, like you said, challenging modern feminism, talking about the true role of women in and out of the family, and a role that inspires dignity and that protects their dignity. And I mean, we talk to a lot of men as well. There's a lot of male guests, and we talk about masculinity as well, because it's two sides of the same coin. And so, yeah, that's kind of how it's gone. We've had some awesome guests, and we've had some great conversations. I've been able to interview some people that have inspired me so much. I think that's the exciting thing about podcasting, is people whose books that you love or whose ministry you love, you can actually speak with them, and it's hard to ever be able to do that, to just walk up to someone and be like, well, I really like everything that you do. Will you talk to me, and can I record it? Like years ago, you would have been a creeper, but now you're just a podcaster. So
exactly. I love that. I love that. It is. Yeah. It is the best.
That's a good way to say it.
Half the people that want to talk to me only talk to me because I have a podcast. The other half, I'm driving around in Uber, so they have to talk because they're stuck in the car. But other than that, no, it's really nice.